The phone rang like a funeral bell. It was her, Megan, my daughter-in-law. Her voice cut through the receiver like a poisoned dagger. "If you want to be part of Christmas, you'll come clean the house," she shouted with that arrogance I knew all too well. "I'm not going to be your servant, Helen. If you want to be with your son and your grandchildren, you'll be here tomorrow morning with cleaning supplies." I closed my eyes. The living room of my house fell silent like an empty church. The evening light filtered through the lace curtains, creating golden shadows on the furniture I had chosen with so much love decades ago. Everything was immaculate. Everything gleamed. Because I, Helen Miller, at 72 years old, have never lived in clutter. "Did you hear me?" she continued screeching. "David agrees. He says it's about time you contributed something useful instead of just criticizing." My heart plummeted like a building collapsing in slow motion. David, my son, my only son. The boy I held in my arms for entire nights when he had a fever. The young man I applauded at every graduation. The man I hugged on his wedding day, believing he had found a good woman. "Besides," Megan continued, "this year dinner will be at our new house, the one we bought without your help, by the way. So if you want to see the children open their presents, you know what you have to do." Her words hit me like stones against glass. To see my grandchildren, those beautiful creatures who carried my blood, who ran to me shouting "Grandma" every time they saw me. Now my presence was conditioned on me becoming their maid. "Well," she insisted, "are you going to come clean, or would you rather stay alone in your little old house watching soap operas?" Little old house. As if this house, where I raised my son as a single mother, where I worked double shifts to give him everything he needed, was something despicable. As if these walls, which held decades of love and sacrifice, were worthless. "Enjoy it," I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "What did you say?" I said, "Enjoy it. Have a beautiful Christmas." And I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat in my favorite armchair, the green velvet one that had belonged to my mother, holding the phone as if it were a sacred relic. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was something different. It was determination crystallizing in my veins, like burning ice. I walked to the window. The garden stretched out before me like a perfect postcard, the rose bushes I had planted with my own hands, the small stone path David had helped build when he was 12, the fountain where birds came to drink every morning. Everything was in its place. Everything except me and my own family's life. I went to my desk. I opened the top drawer and took out a cream-colored folder that had been waiting there for weeks. Inside, the plane tickets gleamed like golden promises. Destination, a private island in the Caribbean. Date, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. While they were waiting for me to show up with cleaning supplies, I would be boarding a plane to paradise. While Megan was wondering where her free maid was, I would be toasting with French champagne under the palm trees. I had booked this suite 2 months ago, after the last humiliation, when they told me I couldn't have an opinion on my grandchildren's education because I was out of touch, when they forbade me from bringing them gifts because I was spoiling them too much, when they made me feel like a stranger in my own family. But they didn't know something I had kept secret for years, the savings, the investments, the money I had saved by working until I was 68, living simply, denying myself luxuries, all waiting for the perfect moment, and that moment had arrived. I picked up my phone and dialed the travel agency's number. "Mrs. Miller," Caroline's sweet voice answered. "Everything is ready for your trip tomorrow." "Completely ready," I replied, feeling a genuine smile spread across my lips for the first time in months. "And Caroline, make sure the professional photographer is available. I want the best pictures of my life." The morning arrived like a golden caress on my skin. I woke up in the most luxurious suite at the resort, with the sound of waves kissing the white sand like celestial music. The air smelled of jasmine and freedom. For the first time in years, I hadn't woken up thinking about the needs of others, about constant demands, about silent reproaches. I approached the mirror in the marble bathroom. The woman looking back at me had sparkling eyes, 72 years old, and I finally looked radiant. The coral dress I had bought especially for this trip fit me perfectly. It highlighted the golden tan already beginning to form on my skin. Breakfast was served on my private terrace. Tropical fruits I had never tasted, coffee that tasted like glory, freshly baked bread that melted in my mouth like butter. As I ate, I thought of Megan. She was probably waiting for me with the cleaning supplies, looking at the clock, wondering where her free maid was. "Excuse me, Mrs. Miller." A soft voice interrupted me. It was Mark, the resort's professional photographer. A charming young man with a genuine smile. "Are you ready for the photo shoot?" "More than ready," I replied, feeling an excitement I thought was lost forever. For the next few hours, I became the star of my own movie. Photos on the beach, with the sun creating a golden halo around my figure. Photos in the infinity pool, with the ocean stretching to the horizon like an eternal promise. Photos at the gourmet restaurant, toasting with champagne that cost more than Megan's monthly budget. Every click of the camera was a declaration of independence. Every pose was an act of rebellion against years of making myself small, of accepting crumbs, of allowing them to treat me like an old, bothersome piece of furniture. "You have incredible energy," Mark told me as he reviewed the photos on his camera. "You can tell you're living your best moment." "That's right," I replied, surprising myself at how confident my voice sounded. "I am being reborn." As Mark captured my image in different settings around the resort, my mind traveled to the exact moment when everything went wrong. It had been 2 years ago, at a seemingly normal family dinner. David had announced that Megan was pregnant with their third child. I had jumped with excitement, hugging them, offering to help in any way I could. "That won't be necessary, Helen," Megan had said with that fake smile I knew so well. "My mother is going to come help me. She actually understands how to raise modern children." The stab had been directly to the heart. David had said nothing. He had just looked down, as he always did when his wife humiliated me. My silence had become an accomplice to my own destruction. "Mrs. Miller," Mark brought me out of my thoughts. "Could we take some photos on the private yacht? The captain says the sunset will be spectacular from the sea." "Of course," I replied, feeling the adrenaline of revenge run through my veins like golden honey. The yacht was a floating work of art. Polished wood, glass deck, interiors that looked like they were straight out of a luxury magazine. As we sailed through crystal-clear waters, Mark couldn't stop taking pictures. Me posing on the bow, with the wind moving my silver hair like silk. Me toasting with rosé champagne while the sun reflected in my glass like liquid diamonds. "These photos are going to be sensational," Mark murmured, clearly impressed. "Are you celebrating something special?" "My independence?" I replied without hesitation. After 72 years, I've finally learned that I don't need anyone's approval to be happy. In the afternoon, while enjoying a massage with aromatic oils at the spa, my mind continued to unravel the threads of the past. I remembered every humiliation, every exclusion, every moment they made me feel invisible. The Christmases where I arrived with gifts and was met with long faces. The birthdays where my presence seemed to bother more than delight. I especially remembered last year, when my grandchildren had performed in a school play. I found out by chance when I overheard David talking on the phone with his mother-in-law, inviting her. They didn't even mention it to me. I arrived as a surprise and saw Megan's mother occupying the seat of honor in the front row, while I had to stand in the back. After the play, when I went to congratulate my grandchildren, Emily had said something that broke my soul. "Grandma, why do you never come to our important events?" I didn't know what to explain. I couldn't tell her that her mother deliberately excluded me. I couldn't poison her childish heart with the bitter truth. The massage therapist worked the knots of tension in my shoulders as I remembered the straw that broke the camel's back. It had been a month ago when David had called me to borrow money. "It's for Megan's car, Mom. Hers broke down, and she needs a new one to take the kids to school." I had agreed immediately. I transferred the money without questions, without conditions, as I always had. But 2 days later, I saw on Megan's social media the photos of the new car, a brand new, fully loaded BMW that cost 3 times what I had loaned them. They had used my money as part of the down payment, but they had made me believe it was for something basic and necessary. That was the final betrayal. Not only did they lie to me, but they underestimated me, believing I was too foolish to discover the truth. The sun was beginning to set when I returned to my suite. The photos had already been edited and transferred to my phone. They were works of art. I was the star of each one, radiant, elegant, happy, a woman who had decided to write her own ending instead of letting others dictate it. I opened my social media app for the first time in months. I had kept my profiles practically abandoned, using them only to see photos of my grandchildren that Megan shared when she wanted to show off as the perfect mother. I uploaded the first photo, me on the beach, the coral dress fluttering in the wind, my silver hair shining under the sun, a genuine smile lighting up my face. The caption was simple but powerful. When life closes doors, build your own palace. Christmas in paradise. I posted it. My heart pounded like a war drum. The first likes started coming in like raindrops at first, then like a torrent. Friends I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, acquaintances from work, all commenting on how radiant I looked, how happy, how elegant. Helen, you look beautiful, living your best life. You are an inspiration. But I was waiting for other reactions, the ones that really mattered. I uploaded the second photo an hour later. Me on the yacht, toasting with champagne, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and purple behind me. My smile was pure satisfaction. The caption read, "Toasting to second chances and new beginnings. When you close a toxic chapter, life gives you blank pages to write your own happiness." My phone buzzed. A private message. It was from my older sister Susan, who lived in another city. "Helen, where on earth are you? David called me in a panic, asking for you. He says you were supposed to go clean Megan's house for Christmas dinner, and you never showed up." I replied immediately. "I'm where I should have been years ago, Susan, taking care of myself. But the children, what will they think when you're not there for Christmas?" "They'll think whatever Megan tells them to think, as always." There was a long pause before her next message. "Helen, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart sped up. "What is it?" "Last year, when they invited me to your oldest grandson's graduation and not you, David told me you had been very busy with your things and preferred not to go. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to get involved. Now, seeing these pictures, I realize they've been lying to me too." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together with crystal clarity. They hadn't just excluded me. They had manipulated the information so that other family members would believe I was the one pulling away by choice. "Susan," I wrote with trembling fingers, "how many times did they tell you I didn't want to go to family events?" "Many, Helen, many. And like an idiot, I believed them. I thought you had become bitter after Dad's death. Forgive me." I closed my eyes. The manipulation had been deeper than I imagined. Megan hadn't just settled for pushing me away from David and the children. She had woven a web of lies to isolate me completely, making my own family believe I was the one to blame for my absence. I uploaded the third photo. Me in the resort's infinity pool, a tropical cocktail in hand, surrounded by absolute luxury. This time the message was more direct. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer to serve it with champagne and an ocean view. For everyone who thought it was easy to walk all over me, here is your answer. My phone exploded. The first message was from Tom, my lifelong neighbor. "Helen, you look beautiful. Are you in the Caribbean? I'm so glad you're enjoying yourself." I replied, "Thanks, Tom. I've finally learned to value myself. You deserve it. You were always too good to everyone. By the way, did you know David stopped by your house this morning? He looked very upset. He was banging on the door like crazy, shouting your name." The image of my desperate son looking for me produced a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. Satisfaction because he finally understood he needed me. Pain because he had come too late, much too late. The messages kept coming. Juana, the housekeeper who had worked with me for years before retiring, wrote to me, "Mrs. Miller, what a joy to see you so radiant. I always knew you were pure gold. God bless you in that paradise." Juana, she really knew me. She had witnessed my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, all the times I stayed up caring for David as a child. She had seen how I worked double shifts to give him the best education, how I denied myself treats so he could have everything he needed. "Dear Juana," I replied, "thank you for always being loyal. You know better than anyone what I gave for my family." "I know, ma'am. And I also know how badly they've treated you. I've seen how that woman speaks to you when she thinks no one is listening. You don't deserve that abuse. Those words were like balm to my wounded soul. Someone else had been a witness. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the slights. I uploaded the fourth photo, me dining at the resort's most exclusive restaurant, with lobster and caviar, surrounded by absolute elegance. The message was devastating. Christmas Eve dinner in paradise. Thank you to everyone who taught me that I deserve much more than what they were offering. Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst teachers. And then, what I had been waiting for happened. My phone rang. It was David. I didn't answer. It rang again. I let it ring. A third time. Silence. A text message arrived. Mom, please answer. Where are you? Megan is hysterical. The kids are asking for you. Please, come home. I didn't reply. Another message. Mom, I know you're upset, but it's Christmas. The family should be together. The family should be together. What irony. Now that I wasn't available to be their doormat, they suddenly remembered we were family. One more message. I saw your pictures. They look amazing. How did you pay for such a luxurious trip? There it was. The real question. They weren't worried about my emotional well-being. They wanted to know where the money had come from. Because in their minds, I was the poor old woman who depended on their occasional charity. I finally decided to reply. David, the question isn't how I paid for this trip. The question is why it took me so long to realize I deserved it. Mom, I don't understand. Please, explain what's happening. What's happening, my son, is that your mother got tired of being treated like a servant in her own family. What's happening is that I decided to celebrate Christmas with someone who truly values me myself. There was a long pause. Then, but the children. Mom, they need you. The children need a grandmother who respects herself, David, not one who accepts crumbs out of pity. My phone began to ring frantically. Call after call. David, unknown number. David again. Another unknown number. I didn't answer any of them. The messages multiplied like a virus. David pleading. Megan furious from friends' phones, distant relatives asking what was happening. But I was at peace. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, without asking anyone for permission. I uploaded the fifth photo. Me dancing salsa with a resort instructor, laughing like I hadn't laughed in decades. The message was blunt. Life begins when you decide to stop living for others and start living for yourself. At 72, I finally learned to dance to my own rhythm. My phone showed 23 missed calls, and the night was just beginning. The dawn of the second day arrived with the constant sound of my phone vibrating on the marble nightstand. It was 5 a.m. in the Caribbean, which meant it was already 6 back home. The perfect time for the day after Christmas family panic. I got up slowly, savoring every second of the freedom I felt in my bones. The sunrise painted the ocean in shades of pink and orange. It was the second day of my new life, and my phone already showed 56 missed calls. 56. I laughed to myself on the suite's terrace. 56 desperate calls from a family that had ignored me for years. The irony was as delicious as the Jamaican coffee I was drinking. I opened the messages. There were over 100. David, Megan from borrowed numbers, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in months, all wanting to know where I was, what I was doing, how I dared to ruin the family Christmas. The first one I read was from David, sent at 3 a.m. Mom, Megan didn't sleep all night. She's devastated. She says she never meant to hurt you. Please, call us. Devastated. Of course she was devastated. Her perfect plan had crumbled. Her free maid had flown the coop, and now she had to face the consequences of years of manipulation. The second message was more revealing. The kids are asking for you non-stop. Emily cried all night asking if you had died. Please, at least tell them you're okay. There was the real pain. My grandchildren, those innocent little ones who had been used as emotional weapons against me, were now suffering because their mother had completely underestimated their grandmother. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I uploaded my sixth photo. Me at breakfast, with a table full of exotic fruits, fresh juices, and a spectacular ocean view. My smile was serene, powerful. The message I wrote was calculatedly calm. Good morning from paradise. Nothing like waking up without the sound of reproaches, demands, or manipulations. Peace has an exquisite taste. The comments immediately exploded. Friends applauding me, strangers inspired by my story, and among them, like thorns among roses, the furious comments from accounts I recognized as Megan's friends. So selfish, abandoning your family on Christmas. The grandchildren must be devastated. A real grandmother would never do this. Each negative comment made me smile more because it confirmed that my message had hit its mark. Megan was so desperate she had recruited her friends to attack me on social media. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I decided to answer. Helen? It was an older woman's voice, trembling. It's Norma, Megan's mother. Norma, the famously perfect mother-in-law who always knew how to raise children better than I did. The woman who had taken my place at every important event for my grandchildren. Hello, Norma, I replied with icy calm. Helen, please, you have to come back. Megan is a wreck. The children don't understand why their grandmother abandoned them on Christmas. Abandoned. The word came out of my mouth like sweet poison. Norma, did Megan ever tell you that she conditioned my presence at Christmas dinner on me cleaning her house? Silence. Did she tell you that for 3 years she has systematically excluded me from important family events? More silence. Did she tell you that she told my grandchildren my gifts were inappropriate because they spoiled them? Helen, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, Norma, because your daughter is an expert at showing one face and hiding the other. But don't worry. You don't have to worry about me anymore. Apparently, you are the grandmother they need. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but not from nervousness. It was pure adrenaline. For the first time in years, I had said exactly what I thought, without filters, without considering others' feelings. I uploaded the 7th photo. Me getting a massage on the beach, completely relaxed, with the sea in the background and an expression of absolute peace, releasing decades of accumulated tension. Turns out when you stop carrying the emotional weight of others, your back miraculously straightens itself. The messages continued to flood in, but among them, different ones started to appear. Messages of support from women who had lived through similar situations. Helen, you are my hero. My daughter-in-law treats me the same way. What courage you have. I don't dare confront my family. After seeing your photos, I booked my own trip. I will not tolerate any more disrespect. I was unintentionally becoming a symbol of something bigger. Women my age, and even younger, identified with my story. They had lived the manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the being taken for granted. Then the message that changed everything arrived. It was from Tom, my neighbor. Helen, you need to know something. This morning I saw David at your house again, but he wasn't alone. He was with a locksmith. I think they're trying to get in. The blood in my veins turned to ice. They dared to enter my house without permission? After everything that had happened, now they were going to violate my privacy too? I replied immediately. Tom, please, go to my house right now. If they're inside, call the police. I'm on my way, Helen. This isn't right. 20 minutes later, Tom wrote back. They're inside. David, Megan, and another man I don't know. They're going through papers at your desk. I'm calling the police. Not yet. First, I want to know what they're looking for. My mind was racing. What could they be looking for at my desk? My financial documents? My will? Evidence of how much money I really had? The answer came in Tom's next message. Helen. They came out with a box full of papers. I heard Megan say something about bank accounts, and she can't have that much money saved up. There it was, the naked truth. They weren't worried about my emotional well-being. They didn't care that I had spent Christmas alone in a paradise because I had chosen dignity over humiliation. All they cared about was finding out how much money I had and how they could get their hands on it. The fury I felt was volcanic, but it wasn't the blind fury of before. It was calculated, intelligent, surgical fury. I uploaded my 8th photo. Me toasting with a glass of champagne from the deck of a yacht at sunset, with diamonds borrowed from the resort sparkling at my neck. My smile was that of a woman who had discovered her own power. The message was devastating. Toasting to life lessons. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. When they show you 50 times, take a vacation to a private island and reflect on why it took you so long to listen. The phone exploded. Call after call after call. This time I decided to answer. It was David. "Mom, where did you get so much money? We found your bank statements." "Hello, David," I replied with a calmness that surprised me. "How about we start by talking about why you broke into my house without permission?" We were worried. We thought something had happened to you. "And that's why you violated my privacy by going through my financial documents?" A guilty silence. "David, do you know the difference between you and me?" "What?" "When I'm worried about someone, I call them on the phone. When you're worried about someone, you check their bank accounts." "Mom, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think, son. And you know what's saddest of all?" "What?" "That it took me 72 years to realize I had raised a son who sees me as a walking inheritance instead of his mother." And I hung up. My phone continued to ring for hours, but I was no longer listening. I was planning my next move. Because this was no longer just about a revenge vacation. This was war. The third day dawned with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in decades. As I drank my coffee facing the ocean, my phone rested silently for the first time since this personal revolution had begun. I had put it on airplane mode overnight. I needed to think without the constant interruptions from my desperate family. When I finally turned it on, there were 127 new messages and 34 missed calls. But this time, amidst the chaos of pleas and reproaches, there were different messages that changed everything. The first was from Susan. "Helen, I need to tell you something important. After our conversation yesterday, I called several relatives. Megan's lies run deeper than we imagined." My heart sped up. "What did you find out?" "Remember our cousin Alan's wedding last year? David told me you didn't want to go because you were going through a tough time. I called Alan directly. He told me you never received the invitation. That when he asked about you, David told him you'd said that weddings made you sad because of your husband's death." Every word was like a punch to the stomach. Not only had they excluded me from current events, they had rewritten my emotional history to justify my absence. "There's more, Helen. Much more." Susan had also called Aunt Joan, our mother's younger sister. She said that 2 years ago, David had called her to say I was developing early signs of dementia, and that's why I was acting strange at family gatherings. He asked her not to call me much because I got agitated easily. Dementia. They had used the mental illness card to explain any behavior of mine that didn't fit their narrative. If I protested being excluded, it was because I was confused. If I questioned their decisions, it was because I was agitated. "Helen, are you there?" "I'm here, Susan. Just processing the magnitude of the betrayal." I also called Tom. He told me Megan had told several neighbors that you were going through a severe depression, and that's why you didn't leave the house much. That it was better not to bother you with visits. The web of lies was perfect, systematic, calculated. They had created an alternate version of Helen Miller, an elderly woman, confused, depressed, antisocial, who distanced herself from her family due to mental problems. Meanwhile, they appeared as the patient and understanding children bearing the cross of a difficult mother. "Susan, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I want you to organize a family meeting. Everyone you can contact. Aunts, cousins, close neighbors. But don't tell them I'm the one organizing it. Tell them it's to clarify Helen's situation, because you're worried." "When?" "Tomorrow. At my house. I have to go back." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I hung up and immediately called the airline. "I want to change my return flight to this afternoon." "Of course, Mrs. Miller. Any problem with your stay?" "On the contrary," I replied with a smile that could be felt through the phone. "My mission here is complete." As I packed my things, I uploaded my 9th photo. Me in the resort lobby, bags packed, elegantly dressed in an emerald green suit I had bought at the hotel boutique. My expression was serene but determined. Paradise was beautiful, but some battles must be fought at home. When you have the truth on your side, no battlefield intimidates you. The comments were immediate and divided. My new followers cheered me on. Go get them, Helen. Show them who you really are. But there were also panicked messages from my family. David, Mom, are you coming home? Please, we need to talk. Megan, from a friend's phone. Helen, I made mistakes. Give me a chance to explain. I didn't respond to any of them. They were right to be nervous. I was coming back, but not as the submissive Helen who had left. I was returning as a woman who had rediscovered her worth, and that terrified them. The flight back was meditative. As the clouds stretched beneath me like white cotton, I mentally reviewed every piece of evidence I had gathered. Not only did I have proof of their current manipulation, I now had a complete map of years of systematic lies. I landed at 8 at night. Tom was waiting for me at the airport, as we had arranged by text. Helen, he hugged me tightly. You look incredible. Radiant. I feel reborn, Tom. On the way home, he updated me on everything that had happened in my absence. David and Megan have been going to your house every day. I think they're looking for something specific. Yesterday I saw them bring a lawyer. A lawyer, I repeated. Of course, they were probably exploring legal options to access my money, perhaps investigating if they could have me declared mentally incompetent. Also, Tom continued, I've seen several neighbors asking about you. They're all confused because the versions David and Megan gave them don't match the photos you posted. We arrived at my house. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but it felt different. It was no longer the refuge of a defeated woman. It was the fortress of a warrior returning victorious from her first battle. That night, as I prepared for the next day's confrontation, I received an unexpected message. It was from Emily, my eldest granddaughter. She had gotten the number from a friend. Grandma Helen, are you okay? Mom says you're sick and confused, but your pictures look very happy. Why didn't you come for Christmas? Did I do something wrong? My heart broke. That innocent child was suffering because she didn't understand the adult war being waged around her. I replied carefully. My love, you did nothing wrong. Grandma is perfectly fine, just learning to value herself more. I love you very much, and we'll see each other soon. I promise. Promise. But I knew that promise depended on what happened in the next 24 hours. Because I was not going to be a part of my grandchildren's lives under the same toxic conditions as before. Either things changed radically, or my relationship with them would have to be completely different. I uploaded my 10th photo, taken from my home's window. It was the familiar view of my garden under the moonlight, but now it looked different through my renewed eyes. Back home, but I'm no longer the same woman who left. Tomorrow, some people are going to find out exactly who Helen Miller is when she stops pretending she doesn't have claws. It was midnight when I finally turned off the phone. Tomorrow would be the most important day of the last few years of my life. The day all the truth would come to light. The day my family would discover they had completely underestimated the woman they thought they had tamed. I went to sleep with a smile on my lips. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. The war was about to begin. The morning of the confrontation dawned with a crystal clarity that seemed to foretell revelations. I woke at 6. I prepared myself with the care of a general before battle. I chose an elegant purple dress, applied my makeup with precision, and styled my silver hair into a perfect bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman radiating quiet power. At 9, they began to arrive. Susan was first, carrying a folder full of notes from her phone conversations. Then, Aunt Joan, confused but willing to listen. Tom arrived with his wife, Norma, both with serious expressions. One by one, they filled my living room. Cousins I hadn't seen in months, close neighbors, even Mrs. Lazarus from the end of the block. Does anyone know why we're here? Asked Cousin Alan, clearly uncomfortable. We are here, I answered from the doorway where I had been watching, because it's time for you to know the truth. All heads turned toward me. There were murmurs of surprise, comments on how good I looked, how radiant, how different. Helen, said Aunt Joan, getting up to hug me, it's so good to see you. David had told us that you... What exactly had David told you? I interrupted gently. Well, that you were going through a difficult time, that you preferred to be alone. Interesting. I moved to the center of the room. Does anyone else have similar versions of my recent mental state? Glances began to be exchanged. Cousin Paul raised his hand timidly. They told me you had early signs of dementia. And you, Alan, that I had developed severe depression after your uncle's death. Mrs. Lazarus, that I had become antisocial and didn't want visitors. Each answer was like a piece of evidence presented to a jury. The expressions in the room began to shift from confusion to gradual understanding. Very interesting, I murmured, pacing the room like a seasoned prosecutor. So, according to my son and daughter-in-law, I am an elderly woman with dementia, depression, antisocial tendencies, and who systematically rejects important family events. Susan stood up. Helen, tell them what really happened. Oh no, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. First, I want them to get here. As if summoned by my words, the doorbell rang. Tom peeked out the window. It's David. He's with Megan. And that's a lawyer. Perfect. My voice was pure satisfaction. Let them in. Tom opened the door. David entered first, followed by Megan, who looked pale and nervous, and a man in a suit who was clearly the lawyer. When they saw the living room full of relatives and neighbors, they stopped short. What is this? David stammered. This, my dear son, is what's called an intervention. But not for me, for you. Megan clung to David's arm. The lawyer muttered something about it being better to come back later. No, I said firmly. Stay. Especially you, Mr. Lawyer. You'll want to hear this. I moved to the center of the room, where everyone could see me clearly. The morning light streamed through the windows, creating an almost spotlight effect on my figure. For the past 3 years, I began in a clear, powerful voice. My family has portrayed me to all of you as a mentally unstable, depressed, antisocial, and difficult-to-manage woman. They have justified my absence at family events by saying it was I who rejected the invitations. The gazes shifted to David and Megan, who looked like they wanted to disappear. The truth, I continued, is that for these 3 years I have been systematically excluded, manipulated, and humiliated. The truth is that 3 days ago, my daughter-in-law called me to demand that I come and clean her house if I wanted to participate in Christmas dinner. There were gasps of shock in the room. Susan, I said, turning to my sister, could you share what you discovered yesterday? Susan stood up, opened her folder. David told Cousin Alan that Helen had rejected the invitation to his wedding because weddings made her sad. Alan confirmed to me that Helen never received an invitation at all. That's a lie, David shouted. It's also a lie, I interrupted him, that you broke into my house without permission to go through my financial documents. The silence was deafening. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Tom? I continued. Could you confirm what you saw? Tom stood up. I saw David, Megan, and this gentleman entering Helen's house with a locksmith. I saw them leave with a box full of papers. I heard Megan mention bank accounts. We were worried. Megan finally shouted. We thought something had happened to you. You were worried about my well-being, I retorted in a glacial voice, or about finding out how much money I have? The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Because you see, I continued, addressing the entire room, it turns out their concern wasn't for my mental or emotional health. Their concern was because a 72-year-old woman had managed to save for decades by working until she was 68, living modestly, investing wisely, and they believed they had the right to manage that money. Aunt Joan stood up. Helen, are you saying they've been lying to all of us about your mental state to justify isolating you? Not just that. Juana, the housekeeper who worked with me for years, could you repeat what you told me you observed? Juana cleared her throat. I worked in this house for 15 years. I saw how Mrs. Miller raised David alone, working double shifts, sacrificing to give him the best education. And in recent years, I've seen how that woman, she pointed at Megan, speaks to Mrs. Miller when she thinks no one is listening. She treats her like a servant, not like her husband's mother. That's not true, Megan protested. Is it not true that you told me if I wanted to be part of Christmas I had to come and clean your house? Megan turned red. I just wanted you to contribute. Contribute? Like when I lent you money for a basic car for the kids and then saw on your social media that you'd bought a luxury BMW? The lawyer approached David and muttered something in his ear. David shook his head, clearly agitated. "Mr. Lawyer," I addressed him directly, "may I ask what exactly you were hired for?" The man looked extremely uncomfortable. I was consulted about mental capacity and estate management. Ah, my smile was fierce. Mental capacity. They wanted to have me declared incompetent to manage my own resources. "No, Mom," David shouted. "We just wanted to make sure you were protected." Protected? My voice rose for the first time. Protected from whom, David? From my own decision-making ability? From my right to choose how to spend my money? From my right to say no when I'm treated like garbage? Tears began to stream down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberated rage, of years of broken silence, of reclaimed dignity. "Look at these pictures." I took out my phone and showed the images from the Caribbean. This is me, a 72-year-old woman who decided to spend her own money on a vacation after her family treated her like a maid. The room was in absolute silence. And look at this. I showed the bank statements David had photographed when he violated my privacy. 50 years of honest work, disciplined savings, smart investments, all mine. All earned through my effort. The lawyer headed for the door. I believe there is no case to defend here. "Don't leave yet," I said firmly, "because now I'm going to need your services for something completely different." The lawyer stopped dead in his tracks, turning to me with an expression of curiosity and fear. The entire room held its breath, waiting for my next move. David and Megan looked like cornered animals, finally exposed before the entire family. "Sir," I began, realizing I didn't know his name. "Mr. Mendoza," he answered nervously. "Mr. Mendoza, do you have experience in cases of defamation, psychological manipulation, and breaking and entering?" His eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am, but..." "Perfect. Because I'm going to need you to sue my son and daughter-in-law for moral damages, systematic defamation before family and acquaintances, and for breaking into my home." "Mom, you can't be serious," David pleaded, rushing forward. "Can't I?" My voice was tempered steel. "David, for 3 years you have painted me as a woman with dementia to our relatives. For 3 years you have justified my exclusion by saying I was the one rejecting invitations. For 3 years you have used my name to create a false narrative that damages my reputation and my dignity." I walked directly toward him, and for the first time in years, I saw real fear in his eyes. This wasn't the fear of a son worried about his elderly mother. This was the fear of a man who knew he had been caught in his lies. "And 4 days ago," I continued, "you broke into my home, went through my private documents, and photographed my financial information without my consent. Is that legal, Mr. Lawyer?" "Absolutely not," Mendoza replied, looking at David with a reproachful expression. "That constitutes breaking and entering and a violation of financial privacy." "But we're family," Megan whimpered. "We just wanted to make sure she was okay." Family. The word came out of my mouth like pure poison. "Megan, do you know the difference between family and strangers?" She shook her head, tears starting to stream down her cheeks. "Strangers don't have access to your heart to shatter it. Strangers don't know your weaknesses to use them against you. Strangers can't make you believe that love comes with humiliating conditions." Susan came to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Helen, tell them about the grandchildren." "Ah, yes. The final blow. My grandchildren," I said, looking directly at Megan, "were used as emotional weapons against me. Remember when Emily told me she couldn't accept my gift because it would spoil her? Remember when you told them Grandma was sick and that's why she didn't visit?" David collapsed into the nearest armchair, covering his face with his hands. "Those children," I continued, my voice broken but firm, "love their grandmother, but they have been manipulated into believing their grandmother rejects them, that she is mentally ill, that it's better to keep their distance." "Mrs. Miller," interjected Mrs. Lazarus from her corner, "the children know the truth. The children know what their parents have told them, that their grandmother is problematic, difficult, that she's going through a tough time. They've grown up watching their parents talk about me with pity and frustration, as if I were a burden." Tom stood up. "Helen, I can testify that those kids are always looking for you. Every time they come to visit and you're not there, they ask for you. The oldest one, what's his name? Jacob. Jacob asked me 2 weeks ago if his grandma was mad at them because she didn't visit them like she used to. My heart broke all over again. My grandchildren thought it was their fault. They thought they had done something to drive their grandmother away. Mr. Mendoza, I addressed the lawyer again. I want to make something very clear. I am not doing this for money. I have more than enough money. I am doing this for justice, for dignity, and to make sure this never happens to another elderly woman in this family again. I understand, Mom. And I also want to change my will. Immediately, David lifted his head sharply. What? My current will leaves my entire estate divided between David and his children. That is going to change. Mom, please? Silence. I roared with a force that surprised everyone, including myself. 72 years I waited to shout like that. 72 years of being the polite, understanding woman who always gave in. 72 years of swallowing humiliations because family is the most important thing. The echo of my voice bounced off the walls. No one moved. No one breathed. But family, I continued, my voice calmer but no less intense, is not who shares your blood. Family is who respects you, values you, includes you, loves you without humiliating conditions. I walked to the window, where the morning light illuminated my garden. The same garden where David had played as a child, where he had run among the rose bushes, where he had learned to ride a bike. All those beautiful memories now tainted by years of betrayal. My new will, I announced without turning around, will establish a trust for my grandchildren's education, managed by a bank. They will receive money for college, for medical emergencies, for their true needs, but none of it will pass through their parents' hands. And the rest? Susan asked softly. The rest will go to a foundation that helps elderly women who suffer from emotional abuse and family manipulation. Women who are isolated, slandered, and made to feel invisible by their own families. Megan let out a sob. Helen, please, I made terrible mistakes, but I can change. We can fix this. I turned to her. For the first time in years, I truly saw her. Not as the enemy I had built up in my mind, but as a young, scared woman who had made horrible choices out of insecurity and greed. Megan, I said calmly, do you know what your biggest mistake was? She shook her head, crying. It wasn't treating me poorly. It wasn't manipulating David against me. It wasn't isolating me from my family. I waited, letting the suspense fill the room. Your biggest mistake was completely underestimating who you were messing with. You thought I was a harmless, dependent little old lady who would tolerate anything to not lose her family. You thought you could rewrite my history, control my narrative, manipulate my reputation. I walked toward her slowly. But what you didn't know is that Helen Miller did not get to be 72 by being weak. I got here by being strategic. And when a strategic woman decides she will no longer tolerate humiliation, she becomes the most dangerous force in the universe. The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Mendoza, I said finally, when can we begin the legal proceedings? Immediately, if you wish. I wish. David stood up, staggering. Mom, give me a chance to fix this. Please. Think of the children. The children, I replied, are exactly who I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about what example I want to set for them about how elderly women should be treated. I'm thinking about teaching them that grandmothers are not servants, or walking bank accounts, or annoying responsibilities. I'm thinking, I continued, about showing them that a woman can defend herself at any age, that it's never too late to demand respect, that dignity is not traded for crumbs of family affection. Susan began to clap slowly. Then Tom. Then Aunt Joan. One by one, everyone present began to applaud. The sound filled my living room, my house, my heart. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of a woman who had reclaimed her voice after years of silence. It was the sound of Helen Miller, rising from her own ashes. The applause gradually faded, leaving a thick silence that seemed to vibrate with the energy of everything that had just been revealed. David remained seated, his hands covering his face, while Megan cried silently in a corner. Mr. Mendoza was taking furious notes in his legal pad, clearly recalculating the entire situation. Now, I said, addressing the entire room, I want you to understand something important. This is not the end of a family. This is the end of a toxic dynamic that was destroying this family. I walked to the center of the living room where everyone could see me clearly. David, I said softly, look at me. My son slowly raised his head. His eyes were red, swollen. In them, I saw the boy he had been, the young man I had raised with so much love. But I also saw the man who had allowed his wife to destroy our relationship. Do you know when you started to lose your way? I asked him. He shook his head. When you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a problem to be solved, when my emotions became inconvenient for your comfort, when my needs became obstacles to your plans. I never wanted, he stammered. You never wanted to hurt me, I know. But there's a difference between intent and impact, David. Your intention may have been to keep the peace in your marriage, but the impact was that your mother felt invisible in her own family. Susan spoke up. Helen, what are you going to do about the grandchildren? That was the question that hurt the most to answer. My grandchildren, I replied slowly, are going to need time to understand the truth. They're going to need therapy to undo years of false narratives. And they are going to need parents who are capable of admitting their mistakes and working to repair them. I looked directly at David and Megan. If you are willing to do that work, if you are willing to go to family therapy, to admit to the children that you lied about their grandmother, to rebuild this relationship from a place of total honesty, then we can talk about a future. And if we don't? David asked in a broken voice. If you don't, the grandchildren will have a grandmother who loves them from a distance, who has left a trust to secure their future, and who taught them by her example that it is never too late to stand up to abuse, even when it comes from family. Megan timidly approached. Helen, I know what I did was unforgivable. I know it took me years to realize how horrible I was being. But when I saw those pictures of you in the Caribbean, when I saw how happy you looked without us, her voice broke. I realized that you weren't the problem. The problem was that I was so afraid of not being enough for David, so afraid that he loved you more than me, that I decided to eliminate you from the equation. It was the first time I had heard her admit the real truth. Not excuses, not justifications, the raw truth. Go on, I encouraged her. I was jealous, Helen. I always have been. Jealous of how David talks about you, of how he admires you, of how he loves you. When I was younger, I thought I could compete with you. But the more I tried to win, the more I realized that a mother isn't something you compete against. She's someone you share. Genuine tears were streaming down her cheeks. But by the time I realized that, I had already done so much damage, I didn't know how to go back. Every lie needed another lie. Every exclusion needed a justification. Every humiliation needed an excuse. And the children, she added in a broken voice, I used them to hurt you because I knew it was the only thing that would truly break your heart. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of finally acknowledged pain. Megan, I said after a long pause, your honesty is a first step, but first steps don't erase years of damage. I know. Are you willing to go to therapy? To work on understanding why you needed to destroy another woman to feel secure? To admit to your children that you lied to them about their grandmother? Yes, she replied without hesitation. Whatever it takes. And you, David? My son slowly stood up. Mom, I knew. Not everything, but I knew something was wrong. I knew Megan exaggerated when she talked about you. I knew some of her stories didn't add up, but it was easier to believe her than to face the truth. What truth? That I had married someone who was capable of manipulating and hurting my own mother. That I had chosen my marital comfort over the dignity of the woman who gave me life. His words hit me like shockwaves. It was the most honest admission I had heard from him in years. David, why did you let it get to this point? Because I'm a coward, Mom. Because it was always easier to let you absorb the abuse than to confront Megan. Because I knew you would love me no matter what. While with her, I constantly had to keep the peace. And now? Now I understand that I lost my mother because I was afraid of losing my wife. And in the end, I almost lost you both. Tom cleared his throat. Helen, what do you need from us? I need witnesses, I replied. I need the truth to be known by everyone. I need that when someone asks about Helen Miller, the answer isn't the poor lady with dementia, but the woman who refused to be walked over. Aunt Joan stood up. We'll do it. We'll all talk to whoever is necessary. And I need time, I continued. I need time to decide if I can forgive. I need time to heal. I need time to rebuild my relationship with my grandchildren without the toxic interference that has existed. How much time? David asked. As long as it takes. It could be months, it could be years. It depends on you and the real work you're willing to do. Mr. Mendoza closed his notepad. Mrs. Miller, do you want to proceed with the lawsuits? I thought for a moment. Would legal revenge be satisfying, or was it what I really needed? Miss Mendoza, I'm going to make the lawsuits conditional on the fulfillment of certain requirements. Which are? David and Megan must start family therapy immediately. They must have an honest conversation with the children about the lies they told about their grandmother. They must make a public statement acknowledging they slandered my character. And they must respect my space and my time until I decide if I want to rebuild this relationship. And if they comply with all of that, and if I see real and sustained changes, then we can talk about forgiveness. But if they fail on any of these points, we will proceed with the full force of the law. David nodded vigorously. We'll do it all, Mom. Everything. Don't tell me, I replied firmly. Tell your children when you explain to them why their grandmother wasn't at Christmas. I walked to the window once more. The sun was high now, bathing my garden in a golden light that made everything look renewed, fresh, full of possibilities. There's one more thing, I said without turning around. What? Asked David and Megan in unison. The next time you want to know about my money, my plans, or my mental state, you ask me directly. The next time you have a problem with me, we solve it face to face, without intermediaries, without manipulation, without lies. We promise, Megan whispered. Because, I continued, turning to face the whole room, Helen Miller is no longer the silent woman who tolerates everything. Helen Miller is a woman who knows her worth, who demands respect, and who accepts nothing less than what she deserves. The applause that followed was different from the first. This wasn't just support, it was recognition. It was the sound of a family that had just witnessed the rebirth of its matriarch. It was the sound of a woman who had reclaimed not just her voice, but her throne. 6 months after the day that changed everything, I was sitting on the terrace of my new house, a beautiful property I had bought on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't an escape, it was a choice. A place where I could start over, surrounded by gardens I had designed myself, with a view of the mountains I had always loved. Family therapy had begun the week after our confrontation. I had insisted on separate sessions at first, David and Megan working on their marriage and understanding the roots of their behavior, while I worked with a therapist specializing in emotional family abuse. I needed time to process decades of subtle manipulation, to understand how I had allowed my self-esteem to erode so gradually that I almost didn't notice. Grandma, Helen, I heard Emily's sweet voice behind me. I turned, and there she was, with Jacob and little Noah, accompanied by David. It was their third visit to my new house, and each time it felt more natural, more genuine. My loves, I said, opening my arms. They ran to me, but with a noticeable difference. The strange tension that existed before was gone. That feeling that they had to watch their words around Grandma. Their parents had finally told them the truth, adapted for their ages, about the mistakes they had made. Look, Grandma, Jacob said, showing me a drawing. I drew you at your new house. See, here are your flowers. The drawing filled my eyes with tears. It was me, smiling, surrounded by bright colors, with a beautiful house behind me. It was how he saw me through his eyes now, happy, free, at peace. It's beautiful, my love. Can I hang it on my refrigerator? Yes, and look, Grandma, I don't have to ask Mommy if I can accept your gifts anymore. Emily had grown so much in these months. Her parents' honesty, though painful initially, had freed the children from carrying guilt that was never theirs to bear. David approached timidly. Mom, can we talk? I nodded, pointing to the chairs on the terrace as the children ran off to explore the garden. How are the sessions going? I asked. Hard, he admitted. Very hard, but necessary. The therapist has helped me understand that, at some point, I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a responsibility, as something that had to be managed. It hurt to hear, but I needed to hear it. The truth, however painful, was the only foundation on which we could rebuild. And Megan, she's working hard on herself. She's been writing you a letter for weeks. She rewrites it over and over because she says nothing she puts down feels like enough. I don't need perfect apologies, David. I need consistent actions. I know, and you're seeing them. The children know the truth now. We've contacted all the relatives to clear up the lies. Megan even spoke to the neighbors to explain that what she had said about your depression was false. It was true. Over these months, I had received calls and visits from family and friends who wanted to apologize for believing the false narrative. Some were genuinely sorry. Others were simply curious about the family drama. But everyone now knew the truth. Do you know what hurt me the most? I asked David. What? It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the exclusion. It was that you completely underestimated who I am. You believed I was so weak, so dependent, so needy for your approval that I would tolerate anything. David looked down. You're right. We never recognized your strength. We only saw what was convenient for us to see. And now? Now I see the woman who raised me alone working double shifts. I see the woman who rose from poverty through hard work and intelligence. I see the woman who, at 72, was able to plan a revenge so perfect it left us all speechless. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely at David. That revenge wasn't just for you, it was for me, to remind myself of who I really am. Grandma, Emily ran towards us. Is it true you have a foundation to help other grandmas? It's true, my love. During these months, I had officially established the Helen Miller Foundation for Elderly Women. It was still small, but it had already helped 15 women in situations similar to mine. Women who had been isolated, manipulated, and made to feel invisible by their own families. Can I help when I get older? Of course you can. David looked at me with genuine admiration. Mom, what you've built in these months, I'm proud of you. Thank you, son. But I didn't do it to make others proud. I did it because I finally understood that my worth doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. That afternoon, after David and the children left, I received an unexpected visit. Megan was at my door, alone, with a letter in her hands and tears in her eyes. Helen, she said when I opened it, can I talk to you? I invited her in. She looked different, thinner, but also more serene. The therapy was changing her. That was evident. I brought this, she said, handing me the letter. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to have it. I took the letter but didn't open it immediately. How are you, Megan? Broken, she answered honestly, but also relieved. For the first time in years, I don't have to uphold all those lies. I don't have to pretend I was the victim of a difficult mother-in-law. I can admit that I was the one who caused this disaster. Why did you come today? Because in therapy, I've been working on something called active repair. It's not enough to acknowledge the damage. You have to do something to repair it. She sat on the edge of the armchair, as if she didn't feel she had the right to be comfortable. I've been volunteering at a center for elderly women, helping with activities, listening to their stories. And in every older woman I meet, I see what I did to you. I see the damage a toxic daughter-in-law can cause. And what have you learned? That older women aren't obstacles for young marriages. They are sources of wisdom we should be honoring, not destroying. That a mother-in-law isn't competition, she's a gift. And that I wasted years of a relationship that could have been beautiful because of my own insecurities. I opened the letter. It was long, handwritten, filled with specific acknowledgments of every harm she had caused. But what struck me most was the ending. Helen, I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it yet. I'm asking for the chance to spend the rest of my life proving I can be different. I'm asking for the chance for my children to see how a woman can recognize her mistakes and work to change. I'm asking for the chance to honor the incredible woman you are, instead of trying to diminish you. I folded the letter carefully. Megan, do you know the difference between remorse and guilt? No. Guilt is a feeling that paralyzes you. It makes you feel bad about yourself, but doesn't necessarily motivate you to change. Remorse, on the other hand, is action. It's the commitment to do things differently. Which one do you think I'm feeling? I think you are transitioning from one to the other, and that's a good thing. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Helen, she said finally, do you think we can ever have a real relationship? Not just civil for the children's sake, but real? I think, I answered carefully, that authentic relationships are built on truth, respect, and consistency over time. If you can demonstrate those three things, sustainably, then yes, we can build something real. How long? As long as it takes. There's no rush, Megan. Strong relationships aren't built in weeks or months. They're built in years. When she left that night, I stayed on my terrace late, looking at the stars. For the first time in years, the future felt full of possibilities instead of burdens. My phone vibrated. It was a message from a 68-year-old woman named Carmen, who had contacted my foundation. Mrs. Miller, your story gave me the courage to confront my family about how they treat me. I have a meeting with my children tomorrow. Could you call me before? I need to hear your voice to feel strong. I smiled in the darkness. This was my purpose now. I had not only regained my own dignity, but I was helping other women regain theirs. I replied, of course, Carmen. I'll call you early tomorrow. Remember, your worth doesn't depend on others recognizing it. It depends on you recognizing it. As I prepared for sleep in my beautiful new house, I thought about the journey I had traveled, from that humiliating call from Megan to this moment of peace and purpose. It hadn't been easy. I had cried. I had doubted. I had been afraid of losing my family forever. But I had learned something fundamental. It is better to be alone with dignity than accompanied by humiliation. And the most beautiful thing of all is that I didn't have to choose between the two. I had reclaimed my dignity, and slowly, my family was learning to love me in the way I always deserved. Before closing my eyes, I whispered a phrase that had become my mantra. Legacy isn't a tombstone of silent sacrifices and crushed dignity. It's a map. My legacy was going to be a map for other women, showing them that it is never too late to defend yourself, to demand respect, to write a different ending. At 72, Helen Miller had discovered that life doesn't end when you decide to stop living for others. Life begins.